What y'all listening to?
Limelight Highlight Podcast.
Welcome back to the show, your positive podcast, safe space and great place for a positive outlook on life. Last episode, we talked about food security, and all those amazing organizations and people who are addressing the problem. It was about 2 weeks ago. I wanted to go back to that real quick, just to give you an update on what the Block Is Back has been doing. So this past weekend, or rather last weekend, the Block Is Back fed the block once again, as they've been doing since the lockdown, and they are now averaging about 125 grab-and-go meals per week. And that weekend that I'm talking about, 2 weekends ago, they totaled up to 160 for that day. So you add that number up, so they got about, since then, 2,510 meals in 20 weeks. In addition to the 160 meals provided, they were also able to distribute 100 fresh boxes of produce that was provided by Sharing Excess, which is a nonprofit organization that connects with colleges and communities to reduce food waste and hunger. Their mission is to bridge the gap between excess and scarcity. I just wanted to highlight those great organizations teaming up to help out the community by providing people with something special to eat. It's always a treat seeing how creative people get, and especially during times like this, and I love the fact that other nonprofits are working with each other. There's a saying, through crisis comes innovation, and the stuff some people are coming up with to create some type of norm today or to make sure they stay in business has been pretty interesting, to say the least. Lately, I've been hearing a lot about how many people are tuning out the news, or they're no longer paying attention to the stuff that they see on TV because of just how depressing it is. It's always daunting and negative. What's even crazier to me is the fact that it's an election year, and the thing people need to be focused the most on is the news, but we're stuck with two choices, bad or worse. And if my choices are between a egomaniac pedophile and a demented pedophile, I don't really want to participate. So people are always saying it's your right to vote and you have to vote and blah, 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 blah. You got to exercise that right. But with the way things are going, I think it's safe to say your vote doesn't really count. It's more of an illusion to say that you got a choice, but given those choices, do we really have one? I mean, I don't want either of those people in power. I mean, I'll probably write my vote in, but I'm absolutely not going to choose between the two morons that we have on stage right now. I'm saying all that because it's pretty evident that people have fatigued listening to how terrible things are in the news, and it can have a much worse impact on you than putting you in a bad mood. I'm going to get real personal and discuss my life experiences and all the effects of ingesting bad news and learning how to deal with it in this episode. I'm going to go over some things that have worked for me, and maybe you can apply them to your life. But before we get into all that, first things first, our unrelated fun fact. Also, these fun facts are from now on going to be significantly shorter than previous ones. So if you need more info on the fact that I'm giving, it's just a quick attention grabber to get you guys engaged, and you want to know more about that specific fun fact, go Google stuff. It's not hard to find. With that being said, this week's unrelated fun fact is actually a pretty crazy one. If you point your keys at your head, if you have like a car fob and you point your keys at your head, it increases the remote's signal range. This works because it uses your brain to act as a radio transmitter, and it's pretty wild. It's almost unbelievable. But the trick turns your head into an antenna, and with all the fluids in your head, it ends up being a really nice conductor. And if you're worried about all the waves and stuff, it's harmless. No need to worry. Just thought that was a really cool, interesting fact. So next time you're in a parking lot and you can't find your car, or you're close but you don't know how close, put that thing up to your head and you'll be all right. Now let's get on with the show. During our lifetime, we get bad news. It comes in all forms, shapes, sizes, whether it's the passing of a loved one, a bill going to collections, not being able to pay your rent. The news, as we just spoke about, is always bad. Job loss, a breakup, miscarriage, or some craziness that life throws at you. At least one of these things has happened to you or is going to happen to you at least once in your life, unfortunately. Sometimes multiple bad things happen at once, My wife always talks about the rule of three, where three things, whether they're good or bad, happen over a short period of time. So no matter what the bad news is, some of it can be really devastating. It can turn your world upside down and leave you feeling hopeless. I know I always touch on how terrible news is and how we need to focus on more positive things, but sometimes that's not always going to cut it. After learning the effects of ingesting bad news, a couple things can happen depending on the severity of the news you receive. It can have an instant effect on your body and cause your flight or flight response to kick in. Your heart might start to race and adrenaline may start to pump, making up crazy scenarios running through your head. Then, depending on the news, you have to weigh out your options and how to deal with the consequences of that specific news. For me, I personally had to deal with a lot of these things over the last 6 years. I've mentioned this before. I got kicked out of the military early and had to worry about getting a new job and supporting my wife, which at the time was one of the most stressful things I had to deal with. My credit cards were maxed out. I felt like I virtually hit rock bottom. On top of that, I had to travel back and forth to San Diego, from San Diego to Philly because family members and even close friends of mine had died. I had to attend their funerals. It was a lot to deal with. Everybody responds to trauma differently, especially traumatic news anyway. And I want you to know that there are steps that can be taken to tackle these obstacles that you will most definitely, inevitably face. Since COVID, it seems like it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I know a lot of people will tend to feel depressed and even some hopeless. I keep hearing over and over again how much people are sick and tired of being stuck in the house, quarantining, social distancing. They want some type of normalcy back in their life. And I completely understand. I mean, I'm in the same boat. I just want to go to a restaurant and eat. You know, it's not really worth contracting COVID to maybe even spread it, because even if you're asymptomatic or not, it's not going to nothing bad is going to happen to you. You can still spread it. And that's the biggest problem and hurdle that we're running to right now. On top of that, unemployment is running out of money. We live in a failed state, and somehow society expects you to live your life like this isn't a big deal. Everybody wants you to keep going on as if everything is normal, and it's not. But this episode is going to be about 5 steps, 6 actually, that you can take to help deal with the daunting outlook of the world right now. And I got these steps from Medical News Today, but I decided to add my own spin on them and how I maneuvered and still continue to deal with some of these things going on in my life right now. So as you may know from a few episodes ago, my grandmother just passed and it still hurts today. My wife made a pretty good observation. The last few years that we've had to deal with death in our family from, friends or family that had passed, the last few passings were really sudden. They were here 1 minute and gone the next. It was very sudden. So it kind of just hit us and we just dealt with it. But this last one hurt for me, especially because of how close I was to my grandmother and the fact that I had to leave her knowing I would not see her alive in person again while she was still alive. It kind of killed me to leave and then not really be around my family to help them mourn or even to mourn with them. To be a part of saying goodbye, something that's always going to bother me. But that leads me to step 1, accepting your negative emotion. Since her passing, I've been in a kind of a funk. I felt myself being sad at random moments throughout the day. I got like zero motivation to do anything. When you receive concerning news, it can trigger what feels like an endless spiral of negative emotions. And I don't know about you, but the first thing I try to do is bottle up that negative emotion and keep it real deep down and just keep pushing, keep myself really busy. But from this article, research that was carried out by the University of California in Berkeley found that attempting to avoid your negative emotion can in fact cause you more stress than confronting it head on. The researchers led 3 separate studies online and in the lab and found that embracing darker moods instead of resisting them can help you feel better in the long run. The participants who habitually accepted their negative emotions actually experienced fewer negative emotions and therefore improved psychological health compared to those who avoided negative emotion. The scientists explained that our approach to negative emotion and our emotional reaction is essential for our well-being. Individuals who accept negative emotions without trying to change them are better equipped to deal with stress. Okay, so this makes sense. It makes sense to me if you think about it. Bottling up your emotions and carrying on as if everything's okay is kind of a recipe for disaster. You know, sooner or later you're going to end up exploding over something so small that it might cause even more damage, like maybe an outburst on a loved one that did nothing wrong, but you couldn't take it anymore, and then you cursed at them or you said something you didn't really mean because you didn't deal with the emotions that you had when you had them and when you should have dealt with them. I've kind of been in that exact position lately. I felt really irritable and annoyed with everything, not realizing that it was my emotions that I had to deal with, and taking it out on everything and everyone around me. It kind of bothers. But I always say you can only control what you can control. Sometimes we feel like we can control our emotions, and maybe we can, but sometimes we can't. The question is, how long can you keep it up, you know? Everyone has their limits, and I'm not saying that you got to do that, you don't have to accept that emotion right at the second you get the news, but sooner or later, you're going to have to accept that bad news and embrace that emotion. And the sooner you can do that, the sooner the healing can begin, or the feeling better can start. Step 2 is to help your mental health when receiving bad news, is to repeat exposure to the news. So, you remember a time when you were super excited to do something for the first time? Like, for example, would be getting your license and driving. I remember the first time I got my license, I wanted to drive everywhere. I wanted to show off and take road trips, and I just wanted to drive. I wanted to be in the driver's seat. I was so excited because I've been waiting to drive for so long. It's like you finally get the green light, you got your license, you're legit, you can get on the road. It was just a great time. I just remember being super happy and super excited when I passed my test. But you fast forward to now, and I drive so damn much that I get dizzy following those lines in the road. I just get hypnotized, and I just want to fall asleep. And it got old. That's kind of what step 2 is all about. You repeat your exposure to the news. The more you hear about it, the more it'll solidify and you can accept it. I mean, it's kind of why I'm talking about it again and again, because the more I talk about it, the less it hurts, kind of, I guess. After a while, you learn that there's nothing in your power to change that news at that time. So some people avoid it, and they don't want to mention it because it opens up wounds and becomes too real for them again. And I completely understand. But I know when I was going through my military stuff, I didn't want to talk about getting kicked out. I was ashamed of myself. I didn't want to talk about how my decisions led me down the road that I wasn't proud of. I did everything to avoid talking about it. I wanted to pretend like it didn't happen and everything was okay, and it absolutely wasn't. What I didn't realize at the time was, as much as I tried to avoid it, the reality would hit me twice as hard, and I thought about it more and more. I was fighting the urge to think about what was to come, and I was so stressed out. I felt it in my stomach. My shoulders were heavier. I remember feeling like I was going to have a panic attack. I really couldn't focus on work. I was having a terrible time sleeping. I was super sluggish. All that. It was just a terrible time. And once again, according to the article, Tel Aviv University in Israel revealed that repeat exposure to a negative event could neutralize its effects on your thoughts and mood. The researchers say that if, for example, you read a newspaper article about a tragedy before you go to work, it's better to read the article thoroughly and repeatedly expose yourself to that information than read the headline and attempt to not think about the event. By having repeat exposure to the bad news, you'll feel freer to continue to go about your day without any adverse effects, to be in a better mood. Another research by the University of Arizona in Tucson agrees that the concept of repeat exposure, the team found out that in situations that cause significant distress, such as romantic breakups or divorce, repeatedly reflecting on the situation could speed up emotional recovery. So as much as we want to avoid bad news or things we feel are out of our control, the sooner we accept it and continue to read or expose ourselves to the news to dull that feeling that becomes, and the faster we can move on. So expose yourself. Repeat exposure. Keep talking about it. Keep bringing it up. Make it a normal